This couple of weeks have been really exciting in terms of archaeology. There's also been a lot of controversy, and mainly due to a lot of news stories coming from. These couple of weeks have been really exciting. Coming from the British Isles. We had about a week or two ago that Cheddar Man controversy, and I say that in inverted commas because it basically is not a controversy. I've already I made a video on it and I explained my situation. I'm not going to go back, but there is I saw some videos quote unquote debunking it. The science is there. The study, which I linked in the description in my last video, I know it was behind a paywall, but it does not matter. I included, one of them was, the other one was not, because there are studies from Spain, from Hungary, from even as far afield as Siberia, where they have extracted DNA material, and we have been finding certain characteristics that are sort of common. Now, when I said in that video, the video I made, that they were exaggerating the color of the tone, the skin tone, to make it darker than it was, I was vindicated. This week, many articles have been, well, the last 2 days, many articles have been written showing no, they were not as dark as they are, because the news, mainstream media, even quote unquote science journalists, these days they don't uphold the certain amount of what I would call standards. My standards are very, very high. I have to have standards that are very, very high, because it's easy to find out if you are talking crap. And I've linked a lot of the articles in the description. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are basically just mainstream media articles explaining both the Cheddar Man and what I'm going to talk about now, which is basically the Mesolithic repopulation of Europe, or displacement of the local. It's difficult, this period in Eurasian history, because we have to take this into account in a much broader geographical area. This is the time when agriculture was expanding. As I've talked before, agriculture was developed in Eurasia, Western Eurasia, because in the Eastern Asia it developed independently. We know that for a fact. But I'm concentrating on the Western Eurasian area. Agriculture developed in what we call the Fertile Crescent, which is the modern day Middle East, which includes Turkey, Israel, of course Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq. The Euphrates River could go east some more, but that is basically what the Fertile Crescent is. Now, it developed around 8,000 years ago, give or take, and then it spread. In Europe, we know that it displaced the local hunter-gatherers that were living in Europe, more or less, give or take, 6,500 to 7,000 years ago, more or less. These aren't fixed dates, because I'm working from memory here. They're easy to figure out. They're easy to find. You just look it up in It's easy to find. I'm giving you a look. Google it. No, not actually Google it. I have always provided enough in my all of my videos, enough links and enough studies that you guys just have to look at my past videos. And I'm whoring. God, I hope that word doesn't. I hope that word doesn't demonetize me. I am shamelessly promoting my channel, as I will now do, because I also have a maker support account if you guys want to check it out. You feel free. Yes, I know. If you want to support me, etc., etc. It does help. Honestly, it does help. And if you guys want to help me, the maker support, my link is in the description. So anyway, back to the story. In that time period in Europe, we know that there was a displacement of the hunter-gatherers by the farmers, more or less around 7 to 6,000 years ago, and apparently they didn't just displace the culture, which I will be talking culture about very, very soon, so stay tuned what culture actually is, but they also displaced them genetically. In fact, the agriculturalists, and when I say agriculturalists, I'm also talking about pastoral, sheep herders, cattle herders, etc., goat herders, farming and herding. That's what I mean by agriculture. So just a small thing, and they were replaced. They apparently, from my last video on Cheddar Man, we know that the Europeans that the European hunter-gatherers were not white as a Swede, a ginger person. Or I have them here in Portugal. So where I live, I have a huge country, quite a big, quite a significant proportion of the area. My immediate area where I live, there is a significant amount of gingers. They are good people. I like them. They do have souls. But anyway, I digress. They were of a darker skin tone, but the articles of Cheddar Man, and I think I mentioned it in my video, they darkened that example to be more or less comparable to Tunisians, the dark-skinned Tunisians, or sub-Saharan, not completely Nigerian black, but a very nice chocolatey color. That is not proven. And the articles that have been showing up say, no, they got it wrong, they shouldn't, there's only one, they've only mentioned one gene. I said, the mainstream media coverage of that has been atrocious. I've mentioned before, we know that there are more than one gene that govern both skin color and color of the eyes, etc. I've made a video before. There's on the replacement of the hunter-gatherers by the farmers from quote-unquote Anatolia. That is the general area where Turkey is, but it definitely covers a bigger area, but we'll just keep it simple and say Anatolia. And they brought in new genetic hereditary DNA, their heritage. They were lighter skinned, etc. Now, I've talked about the genes that are involved in both color of the eyes and color of the skin. We know them. We have mapped them. There may be some others that we still have doubts, but the main ones I've said, they are there. They are the ones that are known are the MFSD17 stroke OCA2 genes and the HERC2. They're not genes. They're markers. They're genetic markers. They're within the They're within the DNA. They're within the chromosomes. These ones influence both color of the skin and the eye color. And every human on Earth has them. Whether they're expressed more or less governs the tone of the skin that the individuals exhibit. Blue eyes are regressive, so brown eyes will always. This is Mendelian genetics, the simplest, most genetic. Blue eyes will always be regressive to brown eyes. Green eyes are weird. I don't know. I'm not a geneticist. I will not claim to be a geneticist, but green eyes and etc. I don't understand how you get them. But brown, grey, blue eyes, I sort of get them because the genes are sort of there. It's sort of a very simple Mendelian genetics. Any 8th grade. Well, when I was doing this, I learned this in 8th grade high school in Australia. So 8th, 9th grade. So it's the simplest you can get. Now, the recent articles have been shown that the mainstream media have blown this out of proportion. I've even seen some really really funny videos produced. They've asked questions to neuroscientists on archaeology and genetics, which I find very amusing, and so on and so on. There's a really good video on it. I'll link them later in the description. I can't remember them now, but he's a British subject as well. He has a Japanese name, but never mind. I'll put it there. So now, getting on to the quote-unquote displacement. During the Mesolithic, Neolithic, Mesolithic, up until the Bronze Age or the Chalcolithic, the Middle Age, the world was a complete cauldron of movements. There were the culture, quote unquote. I will talk about culture, but I'm going to talk about cultures were expanding. They were displacing indigenous cultures at a rate that was unprecedented in human history. In fact, up until that period, all the cultures that were displaced were gradual. Up until basically the discovery of agriculture. Agriculture as Gordon Childe and Lewis Binford and others have shown, was a revolution in archaeology. They call it, in fact, the Neolithic Revolution. It brought about such change. I mean, real change in not just in society, but humans' interactions, etc., which we still are. What's the word? We still are experiencing that change. We are still it's still part of us. We are still the sometimes I forget the word, but it'll come to me. But there were more than one. The first one was the Neolithic displacement by the Mesolithic cultures, the agriculture displacing the hunter-gatherers. But then there was another one, which I'm going to share. And that one was a bit later, was around 4,500 years ago. And it sort of touches on to me, but I couldn't find the graph. The problem is I couldn't find the graph. It was a beautiful graph showing that they found the oldest actual skeletal remains of the culture which I'm going to talk about now in Portugal. And also, I'll try and find that, and during the week, when I can, I'll put in the link. I was looking for it all day. I apologize, but it was I found it in Twitter, and it showed that the story that showed that I think it might be in one of the studies, but bear in mind I just skipped through them, but I'm focusing on more of the actual this article here, and we will be talking about the second quote unquote invasion of Europe, quote unquote, from a culture that replaced what was the replacement of Cheddar Man, quote unquote. See, Cheddar Man was replaced by the first farmers. Now we are moving a bit forward, and those first farmers were replaced by another group. So it has nothing to do with politics. Before I get into it, I have a link in especially the BBC article in the description and the Guardian article, which painted they are trying to push for modern today this inevitability of mass immigration. And we know what happened to the natives when these mass immigrations took place, but I will not get into that political side because I'm just going to talk about the science. So I'm going to share now the article, and it's from Nature, the magazine Nature, and it basically is there was an ancient genome study finds Bronze Age, quote, beaker culture, unquote, invaded Britain. Now, who were the beaker culture? I have here my archaeological dictionary. It's called the Facts on File Dictionary of Archaeology. I used this at university, by the way. This was one of my required readings. Well, I had to buy this, and it was edited by Ruth D. Whitehouse. And basically, I will read a little bit of, just so you guys know what the official archaeological. At the bottom of the article, well, not this one, no. But I will tell you what the beaker culture was. The beaker culture basically started off in the what we call now the Western Asia, or the area of where is Turkey, etc., etc. Like I said, the Levant, and it was a culture characterized by these beautiful bell-shaped beakers. Behind it is a bowl, but the most characteristic is this. The one on the left-hand side is a bell beaker, and we find these around the 3rd millennium BC, more or less in the Bronze Age, in many parts of Europe, from Spain, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, from Italy to Britain. The beaker pots are commonly found in graves, which were more often simple inhumations around underground burrows. A burrow is basically a small megalithic tomb, sort of like megalithic tomb. You have them in France, Portugal, Spain, Britain, Ireland, more or less that area. These are the burrows. These are commonly associated with copper and bronze daggers and ornaments, flint arrowheads and stone wrist guards, and stone battle axes. I'm reading from the dictionary, by the way, so you guys know what I'm. This is an official textbook. It's I'll give you the ISBN number, or I'll write it down in the description anyway if you guys want to look. It's 0/8160/1893/6. That's the ISBN number. So I'm not taking this out of. This is what it actually is. Now, The beaker people, there are many speculations about their possible origin. Of course, they are, but we know that they arose in, like I said, in the Western Asia. When I say Western Asia, it's the area from Turkey, the Levant, and as I said, what it was. So you guys know it could, and further north, even parts of the Caucasus are Western Asia. So just so you guys know what Western Asia means. But here's where something that touches me specifically. The most popular view has favored an Iberian origin. That's the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, modern-day Spain and Portugal. Why is that? Because they have found, even more or less where this dictionary was written, they found the oldest remains of a beaker person, the people who produced these artifacts. So that is basically what it is. Well, David Clark is an archaeologist, southwest. Some others say southwestern south favored a southern French origin, but it's basically it's common. It's weird because that article which I was trying to find and I haven't found. Basically, I think it's also in the study that the culture that produced the pots do not necessarily reflect the DNA. So that being said, let's read the article. I think I've said enough of a background and broad analysis of what we're talking about. So around 4,500 years ago, a mysterious craze. I hate these expressions. Why can't they keep it scientific? This is a scientific journal, weekly journal of science. Why do they use these idiotic phrases? It is not a craze. It was just a cultural entity. The bell beakers for bell-shaped pottery swept across prehistoric Europe. Yes, it did. Archaeologists have debated the significance of the pots. Well, they had a use. As you can see here, they had engravings. In fact, if you guys look at the engravings, there are some megalithic tombs very, very close to where I live. In fact, I even helped excavate a few. And these zigzag wavy lines are found inside the megalithic tombs in the stelae. Stelae are the upright stones that form the chamber where they buried the chieftain. That is what happened. And we find that these engravings are found inside those megalithic tombs, at least in Portugal. I don't know. I haven't seen. I don't know other areas, but I'm just talking about what I've seen and what I know. So, for more than a century, some argue that they were Bronze Age hottest fashion, shared across different groups of people. Different groups of people, of course, it's a culture. It's a symbol. It could be anything. They were vessels. Why were they bell-shaped? Because they were bell-shaped. The significance may not be in the shape itself, but in the decorations. But I'm just putting it out there. I've read enough about the bell beaker cultures. They were not the only ones. In fact, I have here my first year university textbook from Brian M. Fagan, People of the Earth, and in around that time there was also the Nubian linear pottery culture. In Portugal, we have the cardial pottery, which is in fact close to where found in areas up north here in northern Portugal where I live, and not just northern Portugal, but also other areas of the Iberian Peninsula. Cardia means they were pottery. They were basically decorated using the impression of the cardium mollusks, which is basically a seashell, clam, I think it is, or cockle. No, it's cockle. So cockles. So So yeah, so these bell-shaped guys that you guys hear was found in Segovia, that's southern Spain, and they're characteristics of the Bronze Age beaker culture. This is the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age was very, very significant in Europe. It led to extensive trade networks from both bronze and bronze, to produce bronze, copper, and tin. The United Kingdom was a huge producer of tin, and other areas were huge producers of copper. And there was an exchange, and they produced a characteristic axe, which is the Bronze Age axe, which apparently I might do a video on it. They were possibly used as currency, because we find all over Europe, especially Western Europe, the UK, France, Germany, Holland, some in Portugal, some in the Iberian Peninsula, of hoards of just exclusively of those axes, and these hoards were basically later on were closely associated with the collapse of the Bronze Age, which in the Eastern Aegean we saw the collapse of the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, and the rise of the Sea People, etc. It's a hell of a complex. It's just overwhelmingly complex period. So just putting into context what it is. Now, one of the biggest ever ancient genome studies suggests both ideas are true. Now, all right, let's go back here. I missed something here. For more than a century, some argue that the Bronze Age hottest fashions were across different people, but others see them as evidence of an immense migration of beaker folk across the continent. Okay. Now, one of the biggest ever ancient genome studies suggests both ideas are true. The study posted in Biox. I have this link. This study, as you can see in the article, it's a link. I have the link in the description. On 9th of May last year, and that analyzed the genome of 170 ancient Europeans and compared them to hundreds of other ancient and modern genomes. In Iberia and Central Europe, skeletons found near bell beaker artifacts shared few genetic ties. Like I said before, the culture is there, but the genetics are not, suggesting that they were not one migrant population. But in Britain, individuals connected to beaker pots seem to be a distinct genetic related groups to almost whole replaced the island earliest inhabitants. The second in the replacement, as I said before in the description when I started this video, we have the displacement of quote-unquote Cheddar man by the first agriculturalists, the ones that built Stonehenge, for example, as it says here. If true, this suggests that Britain's Neolithic farmers, the ones that replaced quote-unquote Cheddar man, the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, who left behind massive rock relics, including Stonehenge, were elbowed at by the beaker invaders. There's more than one movement in the areas. Okay, to me, that's definitely surprising, says Pontus Gogland. Well, not to me. I don't find this surprising. There was just a huge amount of movement, trade, etc., that I learned at university, and my textbook Peoples of the Earth attest to that movement. So, but in Britain, individuals connected to the beaker pot seem to be distinct genetically related groups to almost wholly replace the island inhabitants earliest. Okay, I read that before. The people who built Stonehenge probably didn't contribute any ancestry to later people, or if they did, it was very little. We don't know what happens. That's what basically Pontus Gogland is saying. There could have been a collapse of the society of the peoples that built the early megalithic monuments in the British Isles, and then they were replaced by people just going in and bringing in more advanced farming techniques. We don't know. There's been a lot of speculation. Some archaeologists say the study does not prove a scale of the British beaker invasion, but agree that it is a major work that typifies how huge ancient DNA studies are disrupting archaeology. It's not disrupting, it's bringing knowledge. This is awesome. It is groundbreaking, as Benjamin Roberts from Durham University says. Yes, it is. It's not disrupting. It is, in fact, enhancing. Why do they use these terms? I don't like these terms. I like they don't surprise me. It's if you are narrow, just I don't want to say narrow-minded, because they're not narrow-minded. It's broad. It's so broad that it is easily seen. It's exciting. I hope I'm transmitting my excitement to you guys. I'm going to have a drink so I can calm down a bit. Now, the bell beaker phenomenon, the variety of beaker artifacts make it hard to define them as emerging from one distinctive culture. Many researchers prefer to call them the bell beaker phenomenon. Okay, well, basically, this culture, quote unquote culture, well, it is a culture. They all share the same bell beaker tradition. So it's a culture. Mark van der Liden, from an archaeologist from University College London, the distinctive pots, that's what marks them as a distinctive culture. The pots, they could have everything else exactly the same as all over Europe, quote unquote Europe, Eurasia, Western Asia, but these pots make them unique. That is what it's exciting. That is what makes a culture in archaeological terms, by the way. Not in. I'll talk about that soon. Stay tuned. It'll be a surprise very, very soon. The distinctive pots, possibly used as drinking vessels, sure, are nearly ubiquitous. Flint heads, they're nearly ubiquitous. They are ubiquitous. That's what characterizes this culture. Flint arrowheads. Flint arrowheads are not very distinctive. They would basically share the same basic pattern, so a range of patterns. That's nothing that thing. But copper daggers, this is Chalcolithic, not the. I say Chalcolithic, some say Chalcolithic. Both are correct. So if anyone says, "Oh, why are you saying Chalcolithic when it's Chalcolithic?" No, both are correct. So no, let's not get into pronunciations, or else it will be color with the O-U instead of a O. So let's go. So wristband, stone wristbands are common too, but there are also regional difference in ceramics and burial styles. Of course there are, because they are so far away from contact with each individual areas that, of course, they develop local traditions. Yet this continuous geographical ranges of beacons, the beaker sites. So the beakers are basically the common factor from Scandinavia to Morocco. As you can see from this lovely diagram or image, more or less, where the beaker, they say fashion. It's not a fashion, it's a culture. But it's quite elucidative. The Bronze Age beaker artifacts spread across genetically distinct peoples in Europe. Yes, they were the genetically distinct people, because each geographical area has their own heredity. They grow up and they breed to adapt to this local conditions. They spread across genetically different people in Europe, but one migratory group seems to have carried them to Britain. And that article, which I'm really, really trying to find, basically, in fact, it was Janina, Dr. Professor Alice Roberts and Janina. She's a British art historian, but also she's a good scientist. I like her work. She does art history, manuscripts, etc. She and others post this. It's basically so. I think it was Dr. Alice Roberts, Professor Alice Roberts, that said that the bell beaker culture used rafts from the Tagus estuary, that's in Lisbon, and they moved into the UK. And I found that quite. I'm talking about things that I've seen. I wish I could have them here. I apologize, but it was on Twitter. So anyway, getting back to the article. In 2004 analysis of strontium isotopes. Strontium isotopes is a method to basically pin the archaeological remains, bones, etc., to an area which they lived. I understand I basically understand the science. I'm not an expert. So, which vary according to regional geochemistry, suggesting that some beaker-associated individuals did migrate in their lifetimes. So apparently, they have found individuals that grew up in an area and they died in another area and they were buried there. That's how we know that they migrated. And that is what the strontium analysis is. You find it basically in your bones and teeth. That's I think I'm not. As I said, I know the basics. I don't know fully. Past ancient DNA studies have also hinted at huge migrations. Yes, there's been huge migrations every time, and they've disrupted all the local, etc., etc. It is not an insignificant event that linked beaker-associated individuals in Central Europe to an influx of steppe peoples from what is now Russia and Ukraine. I've not clicked on that link. You guys can do that if you want. That's not what I'm talking about. So I'll take their word for it. The latest work, led by geneticist Inigo Olailde. Is it's not a Montoya, so don't bring any Princess Bride memes to this, please. You can if you want. I love that movie, so it doesn't matter. And David Reich from Harvard Medical School involved 103 researchers of dozens at dozens of institutions, including Bronze Age archaeologists. Reich team. Geez, did I say that correctly? I hope this doesn't bring demonetization from saying Reich. And they analyzed more than 1 million DNA variants across the genomes of individuals who lived in Europe between 4,700 and 1200 BC. That's a hell of a lot of variants. I'd love one day to have a geneticist, an actual real geneticist, especially an ancient geneticist, like even Inigo or even David Reich, to basically teach me and also inform you guys, because this really is exciting. And the team led the comments because the team declined to comment because the paper had not yet been published in a peer-reviewed journal. That is how science works. I'm sorry to be overexcited, but that is how science works. Take that away, and it is not science. And I will continue to say this. I don't care who I offend. That is what science is. They have not commented because the paper is not out. I will try and get my hand on that paper one way or another. So the analysis seems to dispel the idea that one beaker people arose from a specific source. individuals in Iberia. Oh, it'd be funny if I did. I'm not going to be so arrogant and say, "Oh, we started it." No, we didn't. I know how it spread. We did found one of the. We still have the oldest individual from that period. So the oldest bell beaker, quote unquote, individual from that culture. So we still have that, and it's Portuguese. Even bell beaker associated people in the same region came from different genetic stock. Nothing controversial about that. It's exactly, yes. The pattern contrasts with earlier upheavals in Europe driven by mass migrations. They are most likely referring to the Mesolithic displacement of the hunter-gatherers by the farmers that came from Anatolia. And I will bet my life that I haven't read that, but I know that that's what happened. That is what they're talking about. It's the best example of something that is pots and not people. Yes, culture. They find the people adopt cultures. So what? Exactly. Now, in Britain, the arrival of the bell beaker pots coincided with a shift in the island's genetics. There are indications that the first wave of farmers, the ones that replaced Cheddar Man, the hunter-gatherers in Europe, in Britain, were declining because reasons. We don't know why they were declining. We know that there was an increase in forested areas. That we know. When we know that there was possibly a decrease in the population. We also think we know that enough of that. Now, we don't know what caused it, and I will if anyone says, "Oh, we know what it is," no, that we don't. There's been studies that doing them. There are studies doing it, but we have no idea why that happened. But we know that they were replaced genetically by these people, the beaker people. Reich's team analyzed the genome, but the sample size is still small, by the way. So we have to take these all these samples that we're having now, that we have in these studies. They are small. They are still not. They are valid, but they are not. But they still remain small. That's what we have to take in consideration. So these in the UK, they have 19 beaker individuals. That's people from that period. And they found that they shared very little similarity with the 35 Neolithic farmers there. So they compared 19 of these 4,500-year-old individuals, more or less, even later, to the earlier post-Cheddar Man. That's a good way. That's what I want to talk about. Cheddar Man farmers, and so they compare. They found that they were not similar. Fine. The pot makers were more closely related to 14 individuals from the Netherlands. Fine. There are many explanations. Maybe those 19 people were traders that died, because we know that there were trade happening there. There's a whole lot of variables to say definitively what is happening. But yes, they were replaced genetically from movement. But 19 to 35, it's still okay. I'll accept that. Yeah. The pot makers were and had lighter colored skin, again, because they've analyzed the genomes of these people. So they found the expressions of the MFSD 17 stroke backspace OCA2 and the HERC2 genes, or chromosomes, or I don't claim to know, but I know that these markers are associated with lighter skin and eyes. I've did it, like you guys, if you've followed me enough, I've made a video explaining how skin color in Africa seems to have come from outside of Africa. It's in my video thing. So basically, that's where I talk about these MFSD 17 OCA2 HERC2 markers. I won't go into that much. They were completely replaced. By 2000 BC, signals of Neolithic ancestry disappeared from ancient genomes in Britain. Okay, so Reich's team finds. Reich. I don't know. I'm going to say Reich. That's how you pronounce it in the correct Germanic way. Largely replaced by beaker-associated DNA. Beaker-associated. Such turnover is pretty striking, yes, but also common in that period, in that time. No, nothing extraordinary about that. There was just a huge movement in that time, like comparable to when modern humans, H. sapiens replaced the H. sapiens neanderthalensis. They replaced them, basically. So the such term is striking, says Jared Hellenthal, statistical geneticist at University College in London, who has studied peopling of the island through the genomes of living Brits. Well, we can't really use the living examples because there's just too much. There's a lot of, you have to be, you take these with a little bit of salt. They are valid. Yes, they are valid, but we have to take into consideration a lot of factors. And so more data could reveal surprises. Yes, surprises? No, not surprises. Exciting new discoveries, exciting new data, exciting new knowledge. But the team makes a good case for the beaker photo replaced the region's early farmers. Yes, they do, obviously. Now, concluding, Reich's team calculated that Britain saw a greater than 90% shift in its genetic makeup. But Roberts says he doesn't see evidence of such a huge shift in the archaeological record. The rise of cremation in Bronze Age Europe could have biased the findings. See, that's one. That is one factor we have to take in consideration. He cautions because it might have eliminated bones that could have been sampled for DNA. Although archaeologists are excited, as I've sort of demonstrated today, to see ancient DNA yielding breakthroughs in problems that have vexed their field for decades. Okay, I don't find it vexing. I just find it exciting. And a couple of decades, I sort of knew that, like I read in the articles from my textbooks. And so I expect some pushback against the latest study conclusions. Not why pushbacks? I don't understand. This last phrase, it's not at all the end of the story. No, of course it's not. There is never an end story. We continue to grow. Anyway, you can see here the reference which they indicate. The references are quite good. That's the article is going to have been better written, but yeah, it tells, it's better than the other mainstream ones, which you guys can have a look at your leisure. So just going to stop this so you guys don't scroll. And basically, to conclude, I've included a few articles, one even by Ian Miles Chung. I was trying to get him on tonight. I hope he reads this. I'm going to send him a link to the article, to this video, because I wanted to, because he wrote an article on Milo's blog, basically explaining how what I said the other, mostly what I exposed expounded in the Cheddar Man video I made. And I would have really loved to have him on and just discuss things one day. I'll get him on. He is cool, and about that one, that's dangerous. The New Scientist article. The New Scientist article is the one that basically, and dangerous in Ma Chang one. Basically the same thing about Cheddar Man, but the New Scientist one it's behind a paywall, so I'm not going to pay. It has a summary, but it basically says what others have said, and what I said, in fact, in my video. The beaker migration, quote unquote, invasion, quote unquote, replacement, whatever. I have them all there. The last two articles, the last two links are the actual studies. The Nature one, the last one, is behind a paywall, but the BioRxiv org one is not on this, the beaker. So please, no, at your own leisure, read them. They are fine. So we ended here. I saw something which I wanted to respond to by Giovanna. Where is it? Here we go. I thought that there had been, from Giovanna Liviana, I thought that there had been DNA studies done back during the early part of this century, which demonstrate that insular Celts are genetically more Aboriginal. If you're saying this part of this century, Giovanna, I hope you're still listening, the 21st century, not the 20th century, but the 21st century, no. They are the Aboriginal Europeans from that period, from pre-Roman. The Romans then conquered Europe and they became the Aboriginal people. The Indo-Europeans is more of a linguistic factor. I don't know. I would love to have someone on that knows more about the Indo-Europeans than I. I understand the Indo-Europeans. I just find them, that concept of the Indo-European, it's more of a language than genetics, or it is still a culture, by the way. And just a sort of I'm planning to do a surprise and not surprise stream next week, where I will talk about culture, and so you guys know what culture is, what I'm talking about. Culture, a culture, and it is not exclusively to humans, by the way, so it is broad. Culture is everything that you pass on to your offspring that is not biological. So I will leave that as my final passing word, and thank you all for coming on. Remember, if you guys want to support me, I have Maker Support. It's in the link in the description. And till Monday, I have some more. Monday, I have some more Neanderthal stuff. So till then.